Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. In this video we're going to be exploring another Global War 1936 to 1945 expansion set. This one is called Alaskan Warriors. Basically what this one is a way, an improved way for you to send Lend-Lease from America to Russia. Now this one wasn't my favorite set. I kind of wanted to like it because it really hits close to home, and I'll show you why. Let's just take this up here. So that's what you get for the setup there. But this is about where I live, is right about here. And the Alaska Highway, the Alaskan Highway, starts right about here. So it's pretty close to where I live, and so I know an awful lot about it. I know it's part of our local history here, right? But it seems to me that all this is doing really, the Lend-Leasing, is just giving money from one nation to another, and it would be different if both nations were on the same side, but in this game you're not on the same side. You kind of are and you kind of aren't, right? Like it's a strange relationship between the Russians and the Allies. That bore out after the war ended, when we became bitter enemies for the next, how many years has it been? 70 something years, you know? And so that's why I'm not so sure about this one. The more money that America gives to the Russians, the less money that America has for the Allies. And so that's why I'm not so sure that I like this one too much. Now, I did another video earlier in the day today. It was called The Elite of the Reich, and that's about SS troops. And if you watch that video, you see that at the end of the video I was stating that that I thought that it might imbalance the game, and that maybe this one would be an opportunity to bring that game closer to balance again. And that was if you were to implement this scheme and you were to take away some of the costs, or maybe all of the costs of implementing it, because America and Russia are going to have to pay for all of this. And there's more than this that you're going to have to purchase, right? Like you're going to have to purchase naval bases and things like that just to play this scheme. So this is what you're going to get. You're going to get a rail bridge, and you've got your seaplane base, and you've got your PBY Catalina. This is the only unit you're going to get. You had a choice of buying one or two of these, and I bought two of them because I am going to play with seaplanes in my game eventually when I get ready. Like it takes forever to get this game going and learn the rules and everything, and so before I start playing with seaplanes, I thought I'd learn how to play the rest of the game first. But I've got seaplanes for all the nations, so it was only natural for me to want to buy two seaplanes, and like I said, you have that option when you buy it. So then you also have the Alaskan Highway marker here, and you have this is some kind of naval base thing, or sorry, air base thing, and your Alaskan territorial guard marker. Plus you're going to need these railway markers here, and this one here, this is a rail bridge that's going to go across the Bering Strait here. Now there's a couple of ways for Lend-Lease. There's this bridge, and then there's Lend-Leasing in the traditional sense, from naval base to naval base, and then along rail lines. But basically what it means is that you could get your stuff, a unit from America here, like say from San Francisco on your major factory, all the way over to Russia here, on the, you know, anywhere up here in the front lines or anything, in one move, when you do the Lend-Lease, because you're going to connect the railways. And like this railway here is already connected, but look at this. I mean, you'd have to go through all of these boats, and of course that's going to be you're not going to be able to do that, right? Like that would be considered blockaded if the Russians were at war with the Japanese. And so what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building the bridge or naval bases to get across here, and then you're going to extend the railway down. Plus you're going to have to extend the railway from British Columbia up to Alaska, right? And this is the scheme in which you do that. So let's just take a look at this. Let's flip this over here. Okay, so Alaska was an important often forgotten theater of World War II. Alaska was a major air hub for Lend-Lease aircraft ferried to Russia through the Northwest Air Staging Route. American war planners saw the importance of Alaska in response to mounting Japanese aggression, began building a chain of bases in Alaska during the 1930s. The U.S. saw the 1,200-mile Aleutian Island chain as stepping stones to the invasion of Alaska and ultimately the mainland U.S. Later, they would see these same islands and the corrals as possible stepping stones to the invasion of Japan. So this is what they're talking about here, is the Aleutian Islands that come down here. And then there's the Coral Islands down here. There's a chain of islands here. So one way or the other, they were thinking that, that Alaska would be pretty important. Because when you look at, coming across the Pacific, that's a long way to cross. But these islands are not so far apart, are they? So that's why they were thinking that. Okay, so at the start of World War II, Alaska lacked road connections to the lower 48 states, and its population in 1940 was only 70,000. There were few interior roads and railways, but most of Alaska was and is today isolated wilderness. Like, you'll find if you drive up there that your vehicle is going to get awfully dirty because there is not a paved road that goes from BC to Alaska. You're driving on a dirt road all the way up there, and that dirt road, it was a feat of engineering marvel to get that built. The American military actually built the highway through British Columbia in the northern part that goes up to Alaska, because we're talking about muskeg and things. I don't know if you know what muskeg is, but basically it's a northern swamp. When we do things up here that's further north than I am. But when you do things up there, you do it in the wintertime because the ground is frozen. Once the summer, once the ground thaws, then you're not getting through there, right? So they had to use these huge boulders because if you just try to put gravel in there, it would just sink into a swamp, right? So they had to use these huge boulders and put them in and then build on top of those huge boulders, like the gravel, right? Otherwise, the road would have just disappeared into the muskeg. So it was quite the feat. I mean, you look on it on a little map here, and it doesn't look that far, but that's thousands of miles. Like down here where I am is thousands of miles to get up there. So it's quite a long ways. It's hard to get for people to get a scale of how big Canada is. Whether they're my friends from the United States or in Europe or whatever. Like, you're used to driving not very far to get to the next town. If you live where I am, and I'm only halfway up through the province of British Columbia, it takes you 1 hour just to get to the nearest town. And we're talking like a tiny town with a gas station. It takes you an hour in any direction to get someplace. Not all the towns have just one gas station. I'm just saying, like, even just to get to in between gas stations. And if you're going east of here, like if you're driving on the highway east from Prince George and you're going to Edmonton, it's 159 miles. If you leave Prince George, 159 miles until you get to the first gas station. So the scale of how big things are up here, or how far apart this is really hard to imagine until you've actually been here and you've seen that. And I'm used to that, right? Like, I'm used to living in a place where it's just a huge forest and there's not that many people, but most of you really couldn't get a sense of that. You could only imagine it, and even then it's hard to imagine the scale of what that is. So anyway, it was a huge feat to try to link Alaska to the lower 48 states. So the Japanese occupied Attu and Kiska at the end of the Aleutian Islands. Kiska had a deep water harbor and defendable terrain, making it an ideal occupation site. While the strategic value of these remote and storm-racked islands is debatable, the morale value of having an American island occupied was not insignificant. And now the Alaskan theater comes into the global war. These rules are written for this game. At the end of the documents, they show you a few changes for access knowledge, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that. So, page 2, and they just tell you what you get, and I showed you what you get, all that stuff that was up on the thing there. So, the regions of Alaska. Now, Alaska is divided into 4 regions. There's Alaska, southeast Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, and Atu-Kiska. So this is the island they were talking about that Japan occupied, is Atu and Kiska. There's two islands there, even though it looks like one. And so that's one. This is one here, and then this is one, and then this is one right here. This is actually expanded a little. On a regular map, you'll see that it's probably only half that size. Anyway, all regions of Alaska have the following characteristics. Okay, so it's roadless terrain for one thing. There is no land movement between the land zones in Alaska and adjacent zones. One or more land units may non-combat move into an adjacent zone by paying a total of 5 IPP to construct a road. So even if Japan went up there, they couldn't go anywhere. Like, you couldn't go over here. You'd have to pay 5 IPPs just to be able to go here. Like and that's more like it. You know, like in Axis and Allies, you just, okay, that's just a zone, and you just, you know, you put your stuff down and and you just walk through it like it was Belgium, right? That's just not the way it is up here. I promise you. Okay, so there's roadless terrain, and now it's also sparsely populated. All regions of Alaska are sparsely populated. No militia can be built in a territory that begins the game sparsely populated. So you can't just throw a militia down up there. There is one militia that you'll get, and that is the Alaska Territorial Guard. But other than that, you can't build any militia up there. So so facilities cost plus 1 IPP in a territory that is remote. Factories cost plus 3 IPP. So you're going to have to add that to the cost of building a naval base or an air base or a factory. And also the weather. Atu and Kiska and the Aleutian Islands have some of the world's worst weather. The Aleutians are visited by frequent storms and dense fogs that limit aircraft flying days. All air attacks to or from these land zones suffer a -2 on all rounds of combat. Strategic bombing attacks inflict 2 damage points, and carpet bombing attacks are reduced by -1 per die. All right. So, page 4. So, let's get into the units here. Now, we've got the Alaska Territorial Guard. So that was built in response to Japanese aggression in the Pacific. Alaska mustered a small militia to protect the territory. The original force was organized in 1942 and comprised of about 6,000 volunteers from communities around the territory. Another 20,000 individuals participated in support and reconnaissance activity. So the Alaska Territorial Guard is the only militia that can be placed in Alaska, and only one of them can be built per game. So that's this marker up here. That's this one that looks like a bear. So you place that in Alaska, and I would just place, you know, what I use for militia, which is a regular Axis and Allies dude. So I would just place him up there like that. So North Pacific Lend-Lease. So the historical overview first. Alaska and the Northern Pacific were important in providing Lend-Lease to the Soviet Union. The Northwest Air Staging Route was a series of airfields carved out of the trackless wilderness of Western Canada in the 1920s. During the war, 8,000 aircraft followed this route, the majority of which were given to the USSR. The Americans also attempted to send Lend-Lease to the Soviet Union in Russian-flagged ships through the Japanese-controlled Coral Straits. So the route is an alternative supply path for the United States to send Lend-Lease aircraft to the Soviet Union. Lend-Leased aircraft may trace the supply path from any major factory in the United States to British Columbia, to Yukon Territory, and to Alaska, and finally to Chukchi, where they must stop moving. They do not expend movement points to do so, but follow this path as if it were a railroad. Creation of this path requires the U.S. to build an air base in Alaska. Once it does, the ALSIB marker in the Alaska land zone to show the route is open. The Alcan must also be constructed. So we have, oh, you know what? I had that on the wrong thing here. That's the Alaska National Guard. This is the Alcan highway marker here, and this is the air base. So you have to build an air base on Alaska, and remember that costs you +1. And you have to build the Alaska Highway, or the Alcan Highway. We just call it the Alaska Highway up here. And then also, you have to place a naval base on Kamchatka in Sea Zone 39. So that's right, Kamchatka. It says 39, but that's Sea Zone 18, so that can't be right. Yeah, there's no way that that's Sea Zone 39. Oh, wait a minute, down here. Yeah, okay, sorry, right here. You have to place an air base or naval base right here. My mistake. So then you have to place that naval base here. And then Japanese Lend-Lease interdiction. Even if Japan is not at war with the USSR, it may blockade Vladivostok and Kamchatka. Each time Lend-Lease is attempted to either port and that port is blockaded, add +2 to the US and USSR's peacetime income. So that's the base at Vladivostok here, and the base in Kamchatka. You know, if those are blockaded by the Japanese, then you add $2 to the USSR's and the US and the USSR's income. So that's a way to increase your income. Lena River. The U.S. may trace a Lend-Lease supply path for up to 3 IPP to the top of the map and to the mouth of the Lena River, which is located off the map. The player may also use the Lena River as if it were a railroad. The Lena River on the map runs from eastern Yakutia through Yakutsk, Chita, and Burachia. So I believe they're talking about this river up here. You see this river here? So you would be going north, because you got to remember, you wrap this map around, right? If it were a globe, and this would be the Lena River, so you would use this as a railroad, this river here. So that's to the top of the map, and I guess you would be talking about going up this way, right? So you would have a naval base, and then you would go up there and you would come down through that river. But you would also have to have that naval base, of course. So the Alaska-Siberia Railroad. Let's just move this. Actually, I'll leave this up here. You don't need to stare at what I'm reading. The U.S. explored a variety of Lend-Lease options to reach the Soviet Union. One such option was to extend rail lines from the railhead at Edmonton, Canada, north to the west coast of Alaska, where a port would be constructed to ferry Lend-Lease across the Bering Sea. So you jointly build that railroad. You have to put a naval base in Alaska, a Soviet naval base in Chukchia, and then you have to put in these track markers to connect the territories. It says to put one here and one here, because you've already got a railroad going through British Columbia, right? And then you would extend the railway through here and through here. Now it says Edmonton, and that's wrong, because Edmonton is in Alberta. Trust me, it's not here. But the rail line goes from Edmonton to Prince George, and then it goes north up through. But this rail was never constructed, I'll tell you that right now. And they really wanted to over the years. The Alaskans have wanted to. I mean, we didn't really care down here in BC because, we're connected to the rest of the world, but these guys are not connected very well to the rest of the world. Just that dirt road, like I said, and of course by shipping and by planes, but they would really like a railroad built up there, that's for sure. So the project cost, now it would take 3 turns to build this railroad, and it would cost the US player 24 IPP, so that's 8, 8, and 8 on the 3 turns, and the Soviet player 12, so that's 4, 4, and 4. And then for an additional 15 IPP, that's 5, 5, and 5, by a combination of the two, whether it's the Russians or the Americans, you can build this rail bridge here. So you build the railway up here, and then you build the rail bridge over like that, and then you go from Chukchia there. Here, let's just move this up over here. Then you need 2 more rail markers. You go to here, and then you go to here, and as you can see, in Amur there is a railway that connects you to the rest of the Soviet Union, right? So, and then also, like if you watched my video on railways, you know that you can build more. So they give you a couple more rail markers here, because of course the Soviets can take out Amur, right? Or they can stay there. So you could actually build markers here and here if you wanted to, but you're going to have to pay the cost of doing that. But they do give you 2 extra markers here. I've only used 4 markers. That's all you need here, but they give you 2 extra ones in case you had to go around or something. So the rail bridge across the Bering Strait is considered a facility, and as such is subject to strategic bombing. So that's that rail bridge that we built right there. It can sustain 10 damages and has no inherent AA guns. It cannot be used while damaged. The bridge automatically takes 10 damages if there is at least 1 enemy cruiser or battleship in the Bering Sea, but it cannot be destroyed. So this is the Bering Sea up here. If you go park a cruiser or a battleship up there, as the Japanese, then you're going to, this will be damaged automatically. You don't even have to use your bombers. It will just be damaged by 10. But what you're doing, of course, is you're taking out one of your boats and using him up there, as far as the Japanese, and then you're exposing them, because you can come up here with planes or whatever. The Americans can send ships up there to try to take you out, right? So it's not as easy as just going and putting a boat there and saying, okay, you can't use the bridge. Like there should be a cost to that, right? Now, as far as the highway, concern of Japanese occupation in Alaska and the importance of, hang on a second. Yeah, and the importance of supporting the Northwest Air Staging Route lead the U.S. and Canada to construct the Alaskan Highway in 1942. So there is no land access from British Columbia to the Yukon or from the Yukon Territory to Alaska until the British and U.S. player jointly agreed to construct the Alaskan Military Highway. So it requires 2 team turns to complete and costs 2 IPPs, 1 and 1. So you pay $1 one turn, $1 the next turn. The British and U.S. players pay for the construction on the U.S. players' turn, but can both contribute in any combination of amounts. Now you're probably going to be using the American money, right? Because the British money is going to be tied up. Whereas the American money, they're looking for things to spend it on, right? But you could use British money if you wanted. Now, once construction is complete, place the Alaskan marker in the Yukon Territory. The road may not be destroyed or bombed. So there you go, right here. I tell you, it may not be destroyed or bombed. Just to find this would be like a needle in the haystack. You know, like they'd have to fly in there and then they'd be out of gas by the time they got to it. Like I said, it's hard to imagine the scope on just how large all of this space is here and how many billions of trees are in there. It could be hundreds of millions, I don't know. Could be a billion. Like it is one massive long space. If you don't believe me, try driving to Alaska sometime. And if you do, stop. I live just 2 blocks off that highway. You can stop in and play a game with me. So then we get into the PBY Catalina, and that's one of these suckers here. It was a U.S. seaplane that saw heavy service in the Aleutian Islands. The PBY was used for anti-submarine warfare, convoy raiding, search and rescue, and escort duty. It had a 2,520-mile range and was ideal for long patrols in the remote coastal regions of Alaska. It had a crew of 10 and carried 5 machine guns and up to 4,000 pounds of bombs, torpedoes, and depth charges. So, the stats on one of those, attack 4, defend 4, movement of 6, it costs 8, available in January 1936, so right from the beginning of the game. It has a target selection of 1 on naval units, a combat air patrol range of 1. It can do convoy raiding, and it cannot cause casualties to enemy aircraft, so you can't shoot down other planes with it. It's basically for use against boats. So, just to remind you a little bit on seaplanes, it's an aircraft for all game purposes. It has to land in a land zone. It can't land in the sea zone. Can't land on aircraft carriers. It doesn't use air bases. It treats a naval base as if it were an air base, which allows it to scramble and extend its range. And it can land in a zone captured this turn, so long as there is a naval base there, or a seaplane base. So you could take out a territory and land there with your seaplane if it had a naval base or a seaplane base. But you have to make sure that before you do that, you don't say, well, I'm going to take this territory out so I can fly all the way there, but don't worry about the fact that I can't fly back. I mean, I'm going to land there anyway. You can't do that. You have to have a safe landing space before you take off, just like every other plane in the game. And then you have the option, if you take that territory, of landing there. But you had to have been able to land in a safe place before that, before you take off. And of course, the long-range aircraft technology will increase the patrol range of the seaplanes by 1. So you can go an extra space if you develop long-range aircraft. The seaplane bases, you know what, I'm just going to summarize it. They can take 3 damages. It costs 3 IPP, has no anti-aircraft guns. So you can damage them, and when there is any damage, then you can't use them. But as far as convoy raiding, so you can use these things to convoy raid. So what happens, you can use it on combat air patrol, so it has to be, you have to put it out on combat air patrol in order to use it. You can use it escorting surface warships, get a single attack against the aircraft unless the aircraft have first strike. Advanced anti-submarine warfare. Players who have developed that automatically get a single attack of 2 against each enemy raiding aircraft, raiding the convoy line where they have IPP to lose. And expansion compatibility. If you are playing with the US-German ordnance, that's the very first ordnance one. A PBY Catalina may be equipped with, and it tells you there's a couple of different bombs there that you can put on there. But since I don't have that set right now, there's no sense in even getting into it. But you will see if you have that set, and if you want to use this set, you can just go and check those out. So there are a couple of setup changes. You get a submarine base in the Aleutian Islands as land zone. So you're going to need a couple of things of your own, right? Not just what you see here. So let's just take these off. Sea Zone 19. So you get a submarine base down here for the Americans. And what else? A seaplane base in the Aleutian Peninsula. So that would be here. And let's just take these off. PBY in San Francisco. So that comes down here. So you get free one of these. And this is just for playing this expansion, right? You get these things. The other things you're going to have to purchase, like the railroad and the highway and the bridge and all that. So there we go. You get that in here. And a naval base in Chukchi. So that's over here. You get that naval base. Sea Zone 37, is that? That's Sea Zone 7. Where's Sea Zone 37? I don't know where that is. 38, 39. Hang on a second, I'm going to pause this and find it. I looked everywhere, and I cannot find a space that says sea zone 37, but you look over here, and there's sea zone 38 and 39. This one is 17, but I believe that's still 17 because there's 18, 19, and usually that's the way they go, right? Like they're next to each other. But one thing that I do find that is a little odd is that the Bering Sea up here should be sea zone 7. I know that because when you come across on the northern route there, you can bring submarines across from way over there, and when you come out over here, this is labeled as sea zone 7. But down here, this is labeled as sea zone 7, and when it says you need a naval base in Kamchatka, it says sea zone 37. This territory here is Kamchatka. The only this is the only water that borders that, right? So perhaps this is sea zone 37 and this is sea zone 7. This one has to be 7. I know that has to be 7. So that would make this one the only one that I don't see. This would have to make that 37. Now if I'm wrong, please let me know. But I'm thinking that this is where you put your naval base on sea zone 37. Now it also says for game balance, add 1 naval base and 1 militia in the Japanese corrals. Now, like this was made in this set was made in part 2, right? Version 2 of the game. Now we're playing version 3 of the game, and in the version 3 setup, you've already got your militia and seaplane base, or sorry, a naval base on there. So you don't add those. I read about that on the internet as well. But you do get an additional Soviet submarine in sea zone 39 here. So there you go. And a Soviet submarine base in Kamchatka. So where's my other Soviet submarine base in Kamchatka? Does it say? Okay, sea zone 39. Right here. So a submarine base right there. All right, so that's the setup changes that you would make. And basically that's all it says for all of this stuff. So you can see what I mean by all of this. Now, it does talk about you putting a naval base in here as well, because you're going to need a naval base up here if you're going to go to another naval base, right? Because there's different options, like you don't have to build the railway and use the railway bridge. But you are going to need that naval base, and you don't need this one then. You can just go through the Lena River over there, right? If you wanted to. So there's different options here of how you would do your Lend-Lease. There's various options. There's not just one. And so you don't have to incur all the costs that I told you about there. You can just incur one of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them. You know, have yourself different Lend-Lease options, but really you only need one Lend-Lease option. You don't need many ways to get stuff to the Russians. You just need one of them, right? So you choose which one is best for you. Now don't forget, this is actually an airbase. So what I would do here, let me just grab this airbase so I don't have to go get a box. I would probably just put an airbase on top of that thing right there like that. So that's building the airbase, and that's for if you wanted to transport just aircraft. That looks like it would be the cheapest route, is to build this. And I think you had to build a highway or something. I can't remember, but anyway, so you build that and then you can send aircraft over. And that would probably be good enough, you know, like if you Lend-Leased aircraft to them. But if you wanted to Lend-Lease all the other stuff, then you'd have to build more infrastructure, wouldn't you? A railway and things like that. Railway bridge. I don't know. I'm not completely sold on this set. It's an old set, one of their first ones, and so I think they're getting better at making them now. Like if you watch the Elite of the Third Reich, I mean that's a wicked set, and the Partisans, really good set. So they're getting more comfortable with their own game, and they're getting better at coming up with these sets. This one, it's okay. But like I said, I'm not sure that I would want to use it unless you gave it to me for free to counterbalance the Elite of the Third Reich. You know, that's a different story. but to incur all those costs just so you could give stuff to the Russians who are not on your side. You know, the Russians win the game, you lose the game. That's what I'm thinking, right? It's not just about beating the Germans and the Japanese, it's about winning the game, and you can't win the game if you give everything you have to the Russians. So anyway, that's Alaskan warriors, and that's all there is to tell you about that. Take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.